This is good. Okay, I will start. Bonjour, bienvenue à ce webinaire, le deuxième d'une série cette année, sur la prévention en itinérance. Mon nom est Éric Latimer, je suis professeur au département de psychiatrie de l'Université McGill et chercheur au Centre de recherche Douglas, de même que coprésident du collectif québécois pour la prévention de l'itinérance que nous allons vous présenter brièvement dans un instant. Quelques consignes pour commencer. Pour la traduction simultanée, utilisez l'icône de langue qui ressemble à un globe en bas de votre écran. For simultaneous translation, use the language icon which looks like a globe at the bottom of your screen. Écrivez vos questions dans le chat. Vous aurez accès aux diapositives, y compris les références, et à un enregistrement après le webinaire. Le CQPI reconnaît que ce webinaire est diffusé à partir d'un territoire autochtone, lequel n'a jamais été cédé. Il reconnaît aussi que les défis systémiques auxquels font face les peuples autochtones ne sont pas limités au passé, sont encore bien présents aujourd'hui. Ces défis se traduisent entre autres par le fait que les personnes autochtones en situation d'itinérance, quelle que soit la définition utilisée, sont grandement surreprésentées sur l'ensemble du territoire du Québec. Le CQPI invite chaque personne à contribuer à la mise en œuvre des 94 appels à l'action de la Commission de vérité et de réconciliation du Canada. À part moi-même, parmi les présentatrices aujourd'hui, on compte Carole Dozo, en ordre d'apparition, si je puis dire. Carole Dozo, coordonnatrice du Comité d'action pour les troubles d'accumulation compulsive. Anne-Julie Roy, directrice des services externes à la Maison Grise et co-directrice du CATAC. Alex Scher, assistante de recherche au Centre de recherche Douglas. Et Chioma Obiakor, qui est la coordonnatrice de la Hoarding Assistance Team à Options Housing à Ottawa. Le CQPI est né en 2021. C'est le fruit d'une collaboration de l'Université McGill et la mission Oulbrury. Le collectif rassemble des membres issus des milieux académiques, communautaires et de la fonction publique dans le but de formuler et promouvoir des recommandations de politique publique et réformes juridiques en faveur de la prévention de l'itinérance au Québec et de favoriser la mobilisation et le partage de connaissances. Le CQPI est présentement organisé en 8 groupes de travail, 6 qui portent sur des sous-populations spécifiques et 2 qui ont une nature transversale. Il y a beaucoup de gens à remercier. Je ne vais pas nommer chaque personne, mais je veux quand même mentionner Art Campbell, qui est le directeur du CQPI et qui va animer la période de questions. Bonnie Herba-François, chargé de projet, qui nous a aidé avec les diapos. James Hughes, coprésident du CQPI, président et chef de la direction de la mission Brewery. Jennifer Broadfoot de McGill et plusieurs autres membres du comité de pilotage. Jessica Soto, qui est co-coordonnatrice du groupe santé mentale du CQPI. Plusieurs personnes mentionnées ici qui ont participé à des rencontres du groupe santé mentale, nos interprètes et le financement du Conseil de recherche en sciences humaines du Canada. Maintenant, pourquoi est-ce qu'on se préoccupe de troubles d'accumulation compulsive dans le domaine de l'itinérance? C'est un trouble distinct selon le DSM-5. Les gens peuvent accumuler les livres, les objets achetés, la nourriture, des déchets, des papiers, des animaux. Les études ne donnent pas tous la même proportion de la population qui est atteinte de ce trouble, mais une méta-analyse indique environ 2,5% de la population adulte en âge de travailler. La proportion augmente avec l'âge. La prévalence à vie va de 1,5 à 5% de la population générale. Et la prévalence est plus élevée, proche de 20%, chez les personnes qui ont été en situation d'itinérance. C'est donc un facteur de risque important. Donc, je mets ici très rapidement le plan. Nous allons commencer avec Carole Dozo et Anne-Julie Roy qui vont nous parler du CATAC et de la Maison Grise et de leurs services. Ensuite, Alex Scher va nous parler d'une revue de la littérature que nous avons menée et parler un petit peu de la méthode de traitement Buried in Treasures. Ensuite, Choma Obiakor de Ottawa va nous parler de la Hoarding Assistance Team qui inclut le programme Buried in Treasures. Nous aurons une courte période de questions. Ensuite, scan environnemental au Québec, approche collaborative au Québec et approche psychosociale avec Carl Dozo. Et enfin, je vais conclure avec des conclusions et recommandations préliminaires, suivies, je l'espère, d'une période de questions. Merci et je passe donc la parole à Carole.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Je vais vous partager tout de suite la présentation. Donc, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Je suis coordonnatrice du comité d'action pour le trouble d'accumulation compulsive et accompagnée de Anne-Julie Roy, qui est co-directrice du CATAC et directrice au service extrême de la Maison Grise de Montréal. D'abord, on va un petit peu vous présenter qu'est-ce que le CATAC. C'est en fait un comité qui est provincial et intersectoriel. Intersectoriel parce que sur notre comité, il y a autant des personnes issues de la recherche, de l'intervention, des gestionnaires au niveau institutionnel et communautaire, et surtout des pairs partenaires qui vivent avec le trouble d'accumulation compulsive. Le CATAC a été créé il y a déjà 10 ans, en 2015, par des personnes bénévoles, des personnes qui souhaitaient améliorer les services pour les personnes qui vivent avec une situation d'encombrement ou de trouble d'accumulation. Et la vision, en fait, du CATAC, c'est que chaque personne puisse finalement vivre en sécurité dans leur milieu ainsi que pour leur entourage et puisse aussi se rétablir dans les différentes sphères de leur vie. C'est pour ça que notre mission a plusieurs finalement axes et orientations. Comme aujourd'hui, nous sommes là dans le souci de diffuser les meilleures connaissances sur les pratiques entourant le TAC, combattre la stigmatisation qui entoure ce trouble, favoriser le développement de services, non seulement pour le TAC, mais aussi pour les situations d'encombrement et d'insalubrité. Et tout ça dans une approche qui est finalement centrée sur la personne et aussi dans une approche intersectorielle qu'on va avoir la chance de développer avec vous aujourd'hui. Pour vous donner une meilleure idée de qu'est-ce que le CATAC, voici quelques-unes de nos réalisations au cours des dernières années. Donc, tout d'abord, le CATAC organise annuellement 4 rencontres avec ses membres et collaborateurs et dirige aussi plusieurs sous-comités de travail. En 2018, le CATAC a organisé le premier colloque sur le trouble d'accumulation compulsive et ce de manière provinciale. Aussi, durant la pandémie, en 2021, le CATAC a animé plusieurs rencontres interprovinciales de façon virtuelle. Je vous dirais qu'une de nos plus grandes réalisations cette dernière année a été la publication et la rédaction du guide Surmonter le TAC. Ce guide a été dirigé, en fait, la rédaction de ce guide a été dirigée par Dr. Pierre Rondeau, qui est co-directeur du CATAC, avec plus de 33 bénévoles, des intervenants, des chercheurs, des pairs partenaires vivant avec le TAC, et tout ça appuyé par la littérature. Le CATAC aussi va avoir comme mission d'accompagner des partenaires, autant au milieu communautaire que public, qui souhaitent améliorer l'organisation de leurs services pour répondre aux enjeux en lien avec le TAC et l'encombrement. Et finalement, à venir, il y a plusieurs projets qui nous tiennent à cœur, comme la collaboration avec Phobie Zéro pour mettre sur pied un groupe d'entraide virtuel pour les personnes vivant avec le TAC, et ce, à la largeur de la province, ainsi qu'une semaine d'activité de sensibilisation sur le TAC qui va se tenir au mois de mai. Je passerai la parole à Anne-Julie Roy.
Merci Carole. Bonjour tout le monde. Bien heureuse de passer l'heure du lunch avec vous. Je me présente, je suis Anne-Julie Roy, je suis directrice des services externes à la Maison Grise de Montréal. Je suis également formatrice pour le trouble d'accumulation compulsive et je dirige le CATAC, comme l'a dit Carole tantôt. Je vous mets un peu en contexte par rapport à la Maison Grise. Qu'est-ce qu'on est, en fait? C'est qu'on est un organisme qui vient en aide aux femmes violentées vivant des multiples problématiques sociales. Donc, on travaille avec toutes les formes de violence, mais on travaille aussi avec toutes les problématiques associées à la violence, entre autres les problèmes de santé mentale et entre autres le trouble d'accumulation compulsive. Tu peux changer de slide, Carole.
Comme un sujet avec une boîte arrière ouverte.
Oh, je vais muter monsieur, madame. Donc, je vous explique un peu les services qu'on offre à la Maison Grise, comment tout ça a commencé. Au départ, on a commencé à faire du désencombrement chez nos femmes qui étaient à risque d'éviction. Donc, on intervenait vraiment en urgence pour faire en sorte que ces personnes-là puissent éviter de perdre leur appartement. Et on était très, très heureuse de ça. On trouvait ça extraordinaire de permettre à des femmes de garder leur stabilité résidentielle. Et on s'est vite rendu compte, en fait, qu'en intervenant en situation d'urgence, on n'adressait pas la problématique qui est sous-jacente à l'accumulation d'objets et qu'éventuellement, c'était pour revenir si on n'adressait pas cette problématique-là. Donc, on a mis sur pied plusieurs services intégrés à travers un continuum. Donc, on a développé, entre autres, un groupe de mise en action pour le désencombrement. Ce groupe-là, il est inspiré là, de l'approche orientée vers les solutions, l'approche motivationnelle et l'approche aussi TCC, là, basée sur les inférences, qui est un modèle clinique là, qui a été développé à Montréal par Kieran O'Connor de l'Institut universitaire en santé mentale de Montréal. Et bon, toutes sortes d'autres services aussi. En développant un peu cette expertise-là avec le TAC, on a été capable de soulever certains enjeux qu'on vit au Québec. Je t'inviterai à changer de diapo, Carole, s'il te plaît, merci. Donc, des enjeux qu'on vit au Québec par rapport au TAC, un des plus majeurs, je vous dirais, c'est que, bon, Éric, il l'a dit d'entrée de jeu, c'est que le TAC est arrivé dans le DSM-5. Le DSM-5, il est sorti en 2013. Donc, pour un trouble de santé mentale, c'est quand même assez récent. Donc, le TAC, il est encore peu connu, il est encore peu dépisté, peu diagnostiqué. Et c'est une problématique assez complexe. Et ça vient, cet enjeu-là, générer beaucoup de conséquences. Ce qu'on va voir, en fait, c'est que les gens sont très peu portés à faire des demandes d'aide par rapport au TAC. Pourquoi? Parce que le TAC vient générer énormément de honte chez les personnes qui le vivent. Pourquoi ils vivent de la honte? C'est qu'en fait, le TAC est tellement peu connu par la population générale que les gens qui en souffrent sont perçus comme des gens qui ramassent toutes sortes de choses, qui devraient donc mieux s'organiser, qui ont seulement, en fait, à faire du ménage, puis tout va être réglé. C'est que la population générale ne sait, ce que la population générale ne sait pas, en fait, c'est qu'en dessous de l'accumulation d'objets, il y a un trouble de santé mentale. Et en fait, bon, ce que ça fait, c'est ça, c'est que les gens font peu de demandes d'aide. Et ce qui arrive, c'est que les gens avancent en âge, restent isolés, et on retrouve ces personnes-là à un âge qui est quand même, qui devient avancé. Et quand les personnes sont trouvées en âge avancé avec un TAC, le TAC est devenu sévère. Pourquoi? Parce que les objets ont continué à s'accumuler toutes ces années-là. Et chez ces personnes-là, bon, on sait qu'est-ce que ça peut créer. Ça crée énormément de conséquences, des conséquences sociales, personnelles. Ça peut créer aussi des conséquences sur l'entourage, sur l'immobilier aussi. Des risques aussi accrus au niveau de l'incendie. Donc, dans ces cas-là, ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on va intervenir en situation d'urgence pour éviter le pire, très souvent, et pour éviter l'éviction. Et ces interventions-là se font très souvent en silo et coûtent extrêmement cher pour la communauté. Tantôt, Chioma d'Ottawa va vous présenter son service à Ottawa et dans sa présentation, elle va vous parler des coûts qui sont reliés au TAC et vous allez voir qu'on parle vraiment de plusieurs millions de dollars par année pour le TAC. Donc, j'avais peut-être envie aussi de vous partager un exemple un peu pour imager cette situation-là. Dernièrement, j'ai donné une conférence sur le TAC à des usagers dans un organisme communautaire. Et il y avait un des participants qui a fait un témoignage qui m'expliquait que lui, il y avait beaucoup de choses chez lui, il ne savait pas trop par où commencer, puis il se posait beaucoup de questions sur pourquoi je suis incapable de sortir mes choses, pourquoi c'est difficile, pourquoi moi, me faire du désencombrement, j'y arrive pas. À un moment donné, il a dit, là, ça suffit, là, je m'en vais faire mon désencombrement. Il est allé dans son garage et il a commencé à essayer de sortir des choses. Et il me disait qu'il s'est senti extrêmement anxieux quand il s'est mis à faire du désencombrement. Il me disait, il dit, j'ai comme l'impression de mettre mes enfants à la rue. Tellement je suis attachée à ces objets-là. Donc, il a vécu vraiment beaucoup, beaucoup, beaucoup d'anxiété à ce moment-là et il en a fait une crise de panique. Il s'est rendu à l'urgence dans son hôpital près de chez lui. Et bon, il a expliqué le contexte dans lequel il avait fait sa crise de panique. Et finalement, on l'a retourné chez lui avec une prescription d'anxiolytique. Et ce qu'il me disait, c'est qu'aucune question ne lui a été posée pour dépister probablement un trouble d'accumulation compulsive. Et malheureusement, c'est ce qui arrive dans beaucoup, beaucoup de cas. Et il me disait que finalement, il avait appris qu'il souffrait d'un trouble d'accumulation compulsive à cause, ben, grâce en fait à la conférence que j'étais en train de donner. Puis cette personne-là, elle était dans la cinquantaine à peu près. Donc, c'était la première fois qu'elle en prenait conscience. Donc, c'est ce type de conséquences-là qui arrivent et selon nous, il y a vraiment un travail à faire au niveau de la sensibilisation de la population en général pour qu'on puisse mieux comprendre le TAC parce qu'il y a beaucoup de méconnaissances encore, puis qu'on puisse éventuellement avoir des gens qui font des demandes d'aide avant d'être arrivés en situation d'urgence pour qu'on puisse intervenir en amont des crises résidentielles et effectivement, oui, bon, favoriser l'émergence de services intégrés dans un continuum. Très peu de services sont encore présents là, dans le milieu communautaire et dans le réseau de la santé aussi. Donc, on va pouvoir y revenir là, au courant de la conférence, mais il y a vraiment des services à créer, là, certainement au Québec. Puis, certainement, favoriser des approches collaboratives. Carole va pouvoir vous en parler un peu aussi tantôt et Alexander aussi dans sa présentation sur l'importance du travail intersectoriel. Donc, voilà. Mais je vous remercie beaucoup. Puis, je pense que c'est à toi, Alexander.
Okay, so hello everybody. Salut tout le monde. My name is Alexander Schur, and I'm with the Douglas Mental Health University Institute. So today I'll be presenting to you the main themes of our scoping review. I'll also be presenting to you the difference between individual and group CBT and buried in treasures intervention, which Chioma will also talk about later. I'll then move on to briefly summarize the findings of an umbrella review we have conducted. That is a review of meta-analyses or a review of reviews, so to speak. After that, I'll introduce quickly the findings of a preliminary meta-analyses we have conducted, exploring the effectiveness of buried in treasures compared to group CBT. And finally, I'll be ending my presentation with the main conclusions of our environmental scan of the CIS network and its response to hoarding disorder in an effort to better understand the state of things here in Quebec. So our scoping review question is, what do we know about programs which can help prevent evictions for people with a hoarding disorder? To answer this question, we explored 6 databases: CINAHL, Medline, Scopus, Social Services Abstract, PsycInfo, and Web of Science. And from these, we retrieved a total of 2,022 articles. But just in the essence of time, I'll direct your attention to the 3 boxes here at the bottom. So this search resulted in 15 articles, which answered our scoping review question. This search also resulted in 3 articles that we used for our umbrella review, which we will come to, as well as 3 articles that we used for our meta-analyses of CBT, which we'll also get to shortly. But first, let's explore the themes generated from our 15 articles in Objective 1. So the most dominant theme that arose from our scoping review was the importance of multi-agency coordination. The academic literature suggests that multi-agency coordination can spread the costs of managing hoarding disorder cases and leverage a greater number of resources that could be employed if only a single agency was made responsible for the issue. However, even with a multi-agency approach, it has been emphasized in several papers that we read that these should be psychology-led. The second theme that we found is the importance of harm reduction and tailored interventions. So this approach involves gradual client-centered approaches to reduce harm and preserve autonomy. It also emphasizes establishing collaborative action plans to avoid forced cleanouts. Our third theme is to include case management and have multidisciplinary teams. So due to the complex nature of hoarding disorder, multidisciplinary teams ensure different disciplinary considerations are met, like fire safety, psychological needs, cleaning, public health, and legal issues, while case management helps to streamline which disciplines are needed at a given time and tailoring the necessary support that's needed for each individual case. So the fourth theme is to focus on preventing eviction and to preserve tenancy. A few papers highlighted that legal frameworks such as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act in the US can be leveraged to protect people from eviction and preserve tenancy. But this still needs a little bit more research in Canada because we don't have equivalent laws yet that are equivalent to the ADA or the FHA, the Fair Housing Act. So overall, combining legal aid to meet short-term immediate needs of stabilizing housing combined with counseling and therapy over the long term can help avoid eviction and preserve tenancy. The fifth theme is the importance of long-term support and monitoring. So this is critical because sustained support reduces recidivism. Despite being aware of the importance of this, though, many organizations that we reviewed in our scoping reviews struggle to offer long-term support and follow-up because it's very costly. This is exactly why long-term follow-up is easier to achieve when an intersectoral mandate has assigned a specific agency or team to it. So our final theme is the importance of considering the ethical and legal challenges of hoarding disorder. So there's a very fine line between protecting the rights of people with hoarding disorder and protecting the public. And maintaining this balance is a very delicate act. So during our scoping review, we were also introduced to several treatment options which exist for hoarding disorder, and I'll introduce them briefly here. The most important treatment for hoarding disorder is CBT, both in group and in individual format. Another treatment we came across a lot was Buried in Treasures, which is a peer-facilitated bibliotherapy based in CBT. Other less studied but promising treatment interventions we came across were CREST, which is Cognitive Rehabilitation Exposure Sorting Therapy, and IBT, which is Inference-Based Therapy. Both of these therapies, CREST and IBT, have their foundations in CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. So finally, there's also a limited amount of research on pharmacological options for treating hoarding disorder, but these are still very much in development, rather new, and we didn't explore that very much. So next, I'd like to highlight some differences between individual CBT, group CBT, and Buried in Treasures. So here we can see a table of the three intervention types. The key points are that both group CBT and BIT take about half as long. You'll see in the durée column, 49 weeks for individual CBT, but 20 weeks only for group, and for Buried in Treasures, also 20 weeks. The group format in CBT, in GCBT, and group CBT, and Buried in Treasures also allows for a greater number of participants to be treated. So 8 to 12 participants for group CBT and around the same number for Buried in Treasures. Finally, a critical difference between group CBT and Buried in Treasures is that Buried in Treasures can be facilitated by peers, which makes it less costly and also increases the ease of delivery of that therapy, which is very critical, considering the overwhelming burden placed on therapists in all of North America, really. So as mentioned, CBT is a dominant treatment method for hoarding disorder. So considering this, we reviewed 3 meta-analyses about CBT for hoarding disorder, which we found through our database search. All 3 studies, all 3 meta-analyses that we looked at concluded that both individual and group CBT treatment results in statistically significant reductions in hoarding symptoms. We also found that all 3 meta-analyses made the conclusion that both younger age and a greater number of CBT sessions increases positive outcomes, or rather, in other words, results in a reduction in hoarding symptoms. However, these studies also highlighted some gaps and limitations in this area of research. Most notably, none of the studies included in the meta-analyses that we looked at conducted long-term follow-up at 2, 3, or 5, or even 1 year post-treatment, meaning we don't know if the statistically significant reductions remain long-term after treatment completion, leaving a lot of unanswered questions about recidivism and symptom return post-treatment. Another caveat is that despite the consistent statistically significant reductions in hoarding symptoms, most treatment completers continued to have clinically significant hoarding symptoms post-treatment. Thus, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of understanding for whom CBT is most effective and to understand more about the long-term effects of treatment. So considering the limiting nature of CBT, that you need a trained clinician, a therapist, and the presence of them to lead the group, or an individual therapy, only the ability to treat one person at a time. Buried in Treasures, the peer-facilitated bibliotherapy seemed rather appealing, very enticing. So because of this, we explored it in greater detail and explored the efficacy of Buried in Treasures compared to group CBT. So here's a forest plot of 3 studies which we compared, Buried in Treasures and group CBT. Hedges G was used to calculate the effect size between groups, providing a standardized measure of magnitude of difference between Buried in Treasures and group CBT. And just as a reference, a value of 0.2 is considered a small effect, 0.5 is considered a moderate effect, and 0.8 indicates a large effect. You can see here, our value that we got is minus 0.03 with a 95% confidence interval crossing the null here in the middle. And what this means is that there is no difference between the effectiveness of either treatment, BIT and group CBT. So in other words, Buried in Treasures is as effective as group CBT. And what is critical, however, despite there no difference, is that Buried in Treasures, again, is peer facilitated and is therefore likely much cheaper and much more accessible in terms of deliverability while maintaining its efficacy compared to GCBT. So just to sum up, CBT is the most widely used therapeutic intervention for hoarding disorder and has the strongest evidence base. Group CBT is more cost-effective than individual CBT while remaining as effective. And Buried in Treasures, a peer-facilitated group-based bibliotherapy informed by CBT, has been shown to be as effective as group CBT with its reliance on peer facilitators rather than trained therapists, making it both easier to deliver and more cost-efficient. Thank you for listening. And I'll pass it on to Chioma, I believe.
Hi, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon. My name is Chioma Obiako. I'm the program coordinator for the Hoarding Assistance team here at Options Housing in Ottawa. 1 minute, and I'll be sharing my screen in a second. I also need hosting and sharing rights, please.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, good morning. Sorry for that little delay. So I'll be speaking on hoarding and the interventions that we adopt here at Options Housing in Ottawa. It's kind of going to summarize what the first 3 speakers have said already, the origin and how hoarding emanates, how to manage it, and the kind of treatments that we use. So here at Options Housing, our aim is to end homelessness by actually preventing it. We believe that to reduce homelessness, the most effective way is to prevent it. So Options Housing has quite a number of programs that are targeted at keeping our clients housed and making sure that they prevent evictions. So just going through, just like the previous speaker said, we have now seen that hoarding is a mental health disorder. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of 5th edition, it shows that hoarding has been defined as the difficulty in discarding or parting with possessions. So we find out that people who have a hoarding disorder accumulate things for reasons best known to them. Some of these reasons range from being secure, having control, just keeping items that they consider to be of value. And at the time that they are going to discard of them, they become very anxious, they can get distressed, and this can even cause them to break down mentally. They also save these items because there's a perceived need for it. They believe that there's some value that is attached to these items, and that is why they keep them. And they keep keeping them and cluttering until the areas and the spaces in their environment become dysfunctional and not fit for purpose. They are unable to sleep in their beds. They are unable to use their cookers to live just a normal functional life. Again, this results in active clutter in living spaces. So understanding that hoarding is not just picking up of items, we also understand that there's a similarly high distress in trying to discard of these items. So key notes to hoarding, some of these points have been stated before. Hoarding affects about 2 to 5% of the population. Rapid interventions such as cleanouts are ineffective. So sometimes we just think, oh, let's just get rid of all the items. Let's just go in and take all the items away. But we find out that that approach totally does not work. I give you a story. I have had a client in, I think, the second Buried in Treasures session that we had. And I will talk more about buried treasures as I proceed. And he was doing very well. The client was doing very well in the group. But the property managers felt that the process was too slow, and they went on and organized a clean out. And I tell you what, that was the second session. We're holding the 5th session now, and the client is back in the Buried in Treasures workshop. What did that happen? What happened to him? They did not allow the client to understand fully the extent of the issues and how to manage the problem. They went ahead to do a clean out, which caused a very high level of anxiety for him. And when he was able to get back on his feet, he began to reclutter the space because the space was now expanded. And then now he's back to square one and all the efforts wasted. And now he's back to the 5th session. So that has proven that cleanouts are totally ineffective. It is actually a very slow roll with Buried in Treasures. Hoarding also starts at about age 13. We find out that children or teenagers who grow up in hoarding eventually begin to exhibit that hoarding behavior as adults. So it starts at a small age when the child is quite young, and that's being the only way the child knows how to function, adopts the same method and continues to clutter and keep possessions and becomes essentially attached to them and finds it difficult to discard of them. And again, we see that hoarding comes with a whole wide range of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, social phobia, and the works. So what do we see? We see on the surface, we see clutter. We see a cluttered room. We see a dysfunctional room. But just like the repetition of the previous slide, there's more that goes on to why clutter occurs. So we have incidents of trauma, childhood trauma, failed memories, stress, relationships that have gone bad, losses. Hoarding can result as a result of broken relationships or loss of a partner or loss of a loved one. We find it difficult to dispose of those items and feel that there's a betrayal if I give this thing out, and then begin to hold on to them and continue to reclutter. Again, finally, poor organizational skills and decision making can also affect what we see on the surface, which we will essentially call clutter. So why do we pay attention to hoarding? What's the need for the immediate interventions that we need to do? We look at the cost of cleanouts and cost of cleanups, And we found out that a hoarded apartment can take an average of about $3,000, depending on the size of the property, to get rid of. Also, the type of items that are being stored in there, if there are biohazards, if there is extensive damage to the property, if there's healthcare needed, there's a whole gamut of costs that are accumulate as a result of hoarding. Another reason why hoarding should attention should be paid to hoarding is also because of the risk to life. A story in Toronto in September of 2010, a cigarette fell from the balcony of an apartment and fell into an apartment, the balcony of an apartment that had so much materials, so much flammable materials, and that caused a fire to break out in that property. And the result is that about 1,200 people were displaced. That cost over $1 million worth of damage and $4.5 million in compensation to victims. Apart from that, 713 units were affected and became uninhabitable. So it's important that hoarded apartments, attention is paid to hoarded apartments, and people seek intervention on time and not when it is too late. Other reasons why hoarding intervention should be deployed in a timely manner is, we've talked about the hazards, we talked about health. In health, we look at molds in the building, damage to the structure, trips and falls. We all even have incidents where items fall on the residents or the occupants of the buildings because they are stacked so high. We also have fire incidents. People are not able to get out on time when these events occur because of the amount of items that are stored in a unit. Then we have worsening quality of life. People are generally isolated. No one goes into an apartment or goes to spend time, and you're not able to invite people into a space, and you find out that you're just generally isolated from everybody else. And eventually, this can lead to eviction when the property manager is tired of the whole setup, and the damage to the property can lead to eviction and in turn, homelessness. So we also need to look at what works and what doesn't work. Just like the previous speaker said, CBT is our best recommended treatment for hoarding, because essentially what CBT does is that it helps the individual to rethink the triggers that he has and the response to those triggers. Most times, those triggers result in a behavior that give an outcome. So for instance, I give an example. So I find out that I'm unhappy at an event. An event happened and I become unhappy, or the individual is unhappy. That is the trigger. What is the response to that trigger? I go to begin to acquire things to give me that same good feeling or feeling of self-worth that I would ordinarily have. And then acquiring things that I don't need. Eventually, that change makes me have a hoarded place when I look at what is the outcome from acquiring all those things. So CBT helps the individual to be able to control his behavior, the behavior or the response to triggers. So I have to be able to understand how to control myself when I'm triggered and the response, so that I have an outcome that doesn't result in a hoarded apartment. Another type of therapy that works is exposure therapy, exposing that individual to discarding and helping them to check the anxiety, exposing them to their fear. What is the fear? The fear is that if I get rid of this item, I will become anxious, I will become depressed, I can have a mental breakdown. So gradual exposing of that of these strategies to the individual also helps them to walk through their hoarding situation. Another method that works is motivational interviewing. Here we talk to the clients and speak to them about reasons to change and reasons not to change. The client is able to decide on his own what to do and how to change and make decisions that will affect him. And finally, we have collaborative decluttering. I think one of the speakers have mentioned that, and then skills training. What doesn't work, and it's also important that we understand what doesn't work when we're working with clients that have hoarding behavior. Shaming or criticism, thinking that when we bully them around or speak to them in negative ways, that will help them to clean up. it doesn't work. Rather, it makes them to recoil and become more isolated and moving away and getting those items to comfort them. Another thing is removing items without consent. That's clean out, just going into a place and just taking everything away. That causes a very high level of distress to the individual. Immediate and drastic clean out, overwhelming the person with tasks, like we see in hoarding. It's a very, in working with an individual with hoarding is a very gradual process. It takes weeks. You see that the Buried in Treasures workshop takes it's about 16 weeks long, because it takes a very gradual process to be able to undo the learnings that have been learned over the years. So it's not something that will happen overnight. So we need to understand that this will be a very slow roll and enable the client to be able to adapt to those changes as they are happening. And then ignoring emotional attachments to items and expecting immediate results. So when we ignore the emotional attachments to their items, clients want to tell you stories. They want to let you know how they got the items. They want to let you know the reason why they are keeping those items. And so it takes a very long time to be able to walk through a hoarded apartment because of the memories and the attachments that have been given to those possessions. So this is part of our objectives in the hoarding assistance team, to reduce hoarding behavior, generally improve living conditions, enhance the well-being of our clients, and then prevent clients from evictions and homelessness. This is just to show the prevalence of hoarding in since the program started. So in the first 12 months of our program being launched, we received a total of 62 referrals. And these referrals come from other partner agencies across the city of Ottawa. And so we found out that this problem is prevalent, and these are just the ones that were reported. There's so many that are not even reported or referred. And it will be interesting to note that some of these referrals are self-referrals. Some people have decided on their own to say, I think I'm tired of living in this kind of condition, and so I am going to refer myself and I need to get help for this situation. And last year we had a total of 57 referrals again. Also noting that the average age for these referrals is in their 50s. We have about 54 as the average age. Sometimes we get clients who are a bit younger. In a few instances, we've had people in their 20s, but mostly people in their 50s are the ones that are actually seeking for help for their hoarding problem. So what are the interventions that we have adopted in the hoarding assistance team? We have the Buried in Treasures workshop. This is our, well, to say the most recommended intervention. We will actually want our clients to start from the Buried in Treasures workshop, because what the Buried in Treasures workshop is that it creates a sense of self-awareness for the client. So the Buried in Treasures workshop is a 16-week peer-led workshop based on the book by Tolin Frost and Gil Sketty. And it focuses on the understanding, motivation, and healthy relationships with belongings. It helps you to be able to address your anxiety and your attachments to your possessions. You're able to rate them and make decisions and rules around the kind of possessions that you keep, that the client keeps. So why we say it is peer-led. So it is peer-led because it is someone who has the lived experience, a person who also had a hoarding behavior, who has been able to walk through those challenges. And the person is heading this and facilitating this group and is speaking to the other participants from a point of knowledge, from a point of fact. So it is actually not a theory-based book, even though the book is based on theory. I mean, the book helps to streamline the thoughts and the facilitation going on. But this person is also teaching from a lived experience perspective. And its key components is that it helps to reduce acquiring. It helps to gives the clients the ability and the power to make decisions over savings versus discarding. It gives them that opportunity to begin to ask questions and drill down to the root causes or the root reasons why they keep those possessions. Why am I saving this item? Why do I have so many of them? So many of these items were acquired as a result of homelessness, a one-time situation of homelessness. Some of the clients did not, coming from the streets, have kept these items because those items help them at a certain time when they didn't have a home. Now that they do have homes, they bring in those items, multiples of them, different types of them, collections that are range from books to tires to broken down computers, all kinds of items in their units. And just because they have been able to find comfort in these items at a certain time of their life, they bring them in and keep those items as personal possessions and attach some kind of value to them. So the Buried in Treasures books helps them to be able to make decisions on why am I saving these items and the need to discard them. And also helps them to walk through their levels of anxiety at the time that they're going to discard them. We see them rating items in order of hierarchy in terms of distress. We also do some kind of practices where you keep an item away for a period of time and gauge and measure your level of anxiety on not having those items around you. Again, Buried in Treasures workshops help the clients to change their beliefs, changing beliefs that if I give out this item that was handed down from my mother, I'm losing a part of her, or I am betraying the trust she placed on me, or I keeping an item because I feel it has multiple purposes. So I'm saving this flower vase because I can turn it into a mug, I can turn it into a frame, I can turn it into, so we have items that are kept because even though they are broken down and then useless as it were in our own regard, in our own thinking, they find value and think that I can use this item another day. Also changing the beliefs of around scarcity, insecurity, and thinking that if I don't have this item today, I might not be able to get it again. So that is, it's kind of just helps the clients to gain some self-awareness and change of perspective during the workshop. Again, it helps to maintain Buried in Treasures helps you to maintain gains that you have acquired. It helps you with practice exercises and strengthening those practice muscles that will help you to acquire those skills that you have gained. Again, we'll look at the features of the Buried in Treasures workshop. The Buried in Treasures workshop it's usually conducted in a group setting of up to 12 people. So we try to keep it as a small group so that everyone has an opportunity to share and everyone has an opportunity to belong. One thing about this session is that we find out that when we do an evaluation, the most the response that pops up most is that I feel heard and I am happy that I also see people that are like me. So people have been in isolation for so long because they've been judged. But this session helps them to break out of isolation and helps them to also gain social support from group members, also understand that they are not alone in this journey. Again, it's CBT based, so it helps in thinking, changing your mental thoughts about items that are kept and the outcomes, your behaviors. It offers self-help materials and a lot of guided exercises. It will interest you to know that in the Buried in Treasures workshop, we do not start discarding any items until session 9. The Buried in Treasures workshop is a 16-week session. So the whole first 8 or 9 sessions is just in helping the client to build his emotions, build his mental preparation, and understanding terms like good guys and bad guys, what forms a bad guy, what forms a bad decision, also what forms a good rule, making rules, taking one out. If I bring in one thing, I have to take 3 things out. So kind of rules like that to help to reduce the amount of stuff in items in a client's unit. So we don't start discarding until about week 9. By then, the client is confident, he's emotionally stabilized and understands that this is a process that has to be done, but it's going to be done in a gentle way that will not create more anxiety or more distress to the client. Again, the workshop can be part of a broader treatment plan. So here in Options Housing, we combine the workshop with the case management. And I also share some results, and you see how the workshop has helped to improve work while working with the case manager. Finally, the workshop helps us to learn strategies to reduce clutter, make decisions about possessions, and manage the underlying emotional triggers associated with hoarding. Again, moving on to the benefits of the Buried in Treasures workshop. So it increases self-awareness. The workshop encourages participants to explore the emotional and psychological reasons behind their hoarding behavior. This self-reflection can lead to greater awareness of underlying issues such as fear of loss, attachment to objects, or feelings of insecurity. So the client becomes more self-aware. He understands that if I lose this item, I can replace it. I don't have to stock up 20 or 30 or 50 or even 100 books. We've seen crates and crates of books that are being kept because if I lose them, these are books that I read as a child. If I lose them, I will never have them again. So the client becomes self-aware and also teaches new adoptive methods. We have suggestions like, rather than keeping books, we can scan them. So we also use technology and things like that to reduce the amount of items in the place. Buried in Treasures workshop enhances emotional regulation. So the program also teaches participants techniques for coping with strong emotional response related to their possessions. So I've spoken about emotional response when you're discarding, when you're disposing of items, distress and anxiety, and even people who do not have a hoarding behavior always have a second or a third or a fourth think of, if I get rid of this thing, what will become of it? What happens if I need it tomorrow? Sometimes we also go through those thoughts, but for this, they may have more stronger reasons to keep them and not be able to challenge those thoughts when they come. So the Buried in Treasures workshop also helps to reduce anxiety and distress. Many people with hoarding behaviors experience significant anxiety when faced with the idea of discarding items. The workshop helps participants understand and manage these feelings, leading to a reduction in distress and greater comfort with the process of decluttering. Improved organizational skills. So the Buried in Treasures workshops gives practice sessions, practice exercises that helps to improve organizational skills. Through structured exercises and gradual decluttering, participants often develop better organizational skills, and which helps them manage their possessions more effectively and maintain tidier and more organized living spaces. Improvements in decision making. Improvements in decision-making making skills. Participants learn how to make more informed decisions about what to keep and what to discard. And finally, it gives a gradual progress and empowerment. So the focus of the workshop is on making small incremental changes. So I mentioned small incremental changes before. Rather than expecting immediate drastic transformation. And this approach can help participants feel a sense of empowerment as they make progress in their space. Other interventions that we use to address hoarding, we also have the intensive case management. The intensive case management is a situation where the case manager comes in to work with the client. So when the client has started from the Buried in Treasures workshop, the case manager helps him to buttress what he has learned in the workshop, use assessment tools such as the clutter image rating scale to guide the workshop on support plans and showing them areas of where they should be at every point in time. It helps the client on crisis intervention activities, support clients also from a harm reduction approach. The authors of the Buried in Treasures workshop realized that 16 weeks may not be enough to go through the whole hoarding experience with the clients. And so they have added onto the service an aftercare session. So an aftercare session is prepared for clients to be able to go through after the 16-week workshop to now begin to review key concepts, have a better grasp and understanding of it, begin to set personalized goals to meeting their overall goal. So we have this aftercare session where clients come in to set goals, and these goals that they work on will help them to meet. So every 2 weeks we meet, we take a section of your place and say, this is the work I want to do. And then we measure them and see how much progress has been made. The aftercare session provides emotional support and coping, also provides accountability and support network, and finally helps the clients to celebrate success. Okay. The HEART team also, or working with clients with a hoarding behavior, is a collaborative approach, and it involves everyone. The hoarding specialists, the clients, the family, the neighbors, the community, everyone is totally involved. Legal aid, there are times we have to talk to landlords, we go to the landlord-tenant board, we do crisis intervention, we talk to property managers and all that. Sometimes we have to do pest preps and all that, just in all the whole effort to make sure that the client remains housed and does not face any eviction. Finally, I will share a study on the program by University of Ottawa, just trying to define and review whether the objectives of the program is being met and whether the clients are gaining the benefits of being in the program, and also trying to track the progress that are being made. So the evaluation questions such as intensive case management support, how is this being implemented? Is the Buried in Treasures workshop also being implemented according to established protocols, and our clients' living conditions improving after 6 months? This is the method that they use to conduct that study. We had clients that were interviewed, staff also being interviewed, our documents were reviewed, and then just also checking our progress tracker to be sure that the clients' lives are being improved over a period of 6 months. We may think that 6 months is a short period of time, but that was the scope of the work at the time. So looking at the HEART findings, they are looking at the client's living conditions improving after 6 months of intensive case management. We use the tool called the activities of the daily living skill. And if you can see displayed on the screen, clients 1 to 3 are exclusively in case management, while clients 4 to 8 are in both case management services and in Buried in Treasures workshop. We see that the clients 1 to 3 who are exclusively in case management, yes, they made progress. They have reduction on their skills from the first review to the second review. Quite there's a movement there. But we noticed that those that had Buried in Treasures added to the treatment that they were getting showed more advanced improvements. They had a bigger leap in their measurements after a 6-month period. So looking at activities of daily living, they were able to improve their activities. Their living conditions are improved, and then safety issues were also improved along those lines. In conclusion, hoarding is an increasing concern across all age groups. Like I mentioned before, you can see it starting from about the age of 13, but people are actually seeking help right about the age of 50. People living with hoarding behavior must be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. There's no one-size-fits-all. There's no one approach for everyone. Supporting the clients with moving from crisis to calm often requires a team approach. So we've looked at the team approach where we looked at the family, the community, the landlord, the case manager, and every service that is involved. Hoarding disorder is complex and calls for increased awareness and early intervention. Early intervention is the key. When this is noted or reported at the beginning, we're able to salvage the situation rather than when we have to wait till the end, it becomes extreme and then we're looking at a clean out. Treatments and interventions are encouraged to continue over a longer period. Because these are learned behaviors or behaviors that have happened over a long period, it's encouraged to continue over a longer period of time. Oftentimes, we find out that the clients stop engaging or there's a disconnect and things like that, but it is encouraged that we have to continue to engage with those clients over a very long period of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chioma, Anjali, Carol, and Eric. So we'll now go to a 5-minute, roughly 5-minute question and answer period. And on that note, we have the following questions. Donc, on va passer maintenant à une période de questions de 5 minutes. Je pense que a quick one would be, hi, Chioma, this program is available in Ottawa, but does it extend to Gatineau as well? Or is there an equivalent on the Quebec side?
If for now, the program is available in Ottawa, with Options Housing being the pilot, being the focal team handling it. There's none immediately in Quebec or Gatineau for now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Bon, la prochaine question, est-ce qu'il existe des ateliers BIT dans la région de Québec, particulièrement la ville de Québec?
Je peux peut-être répondre à cette question.
Merci.
À notre connaissance, il n'existe pas encore d'approche de groupe offerte dans la ville de Québec. Les offres de groupe sont davantage du côté de la ville de Montréal. Comme présentait Anne-Julie Roy, il y a l'offre de groupe à la Maison Grise de Montréal, puis il y a aussi plusieurs types de groupes qui sont davantage des groupes de parole ou groupes d'entraide qui sont offerts, mais avec à ce moment-ci une approche qui n'est pas structurée dans un livre basé sur la TCC comme les Buried in Treasure. Donc, c'est davantage des approches de groupes d'entraide ou de parole où il y a, oui, des pairs qui animent ces groupes, mais ça va être plus autour du partage que vraiment des ateliers de mise en action pour améliorer les comportements liés avec le TAC. Et on a pu justement lister là, les groupes qui existent.
Merci beaucoup, Carole. Puis on a une autre question concernant les DIT. Ça a été demandé en anglais, donc je vais le dire en anglais. Can BIT workshops be applied or offered to people living the street? Or is there a similar program or a treatment available? Peut-être je peux le traduire également. Est-ce que les ateliers BIT, est-ce que ça peut être appliqué pour les personnes dans la rue, les personnes en situation d'itinérance? Et sinon, est-ce qu'il y a un programme ou traitement similaire?
Je sais pas si Chioma vous voulez répondre par rapport à ça, mais j'ai peut-être un élément de réponse. En fait, c'est que les services qui sont offerts en groupe sont difficilement applicables aux gens qui sont en situation d'itinérance. Parce que quand on est en situation d'itinérance, la plupart du temps, on est plus dans le type d'intervention d'urgence, en fait. Par contre, ce type d'approche-là peut très bien s'inclure. Par exemple, si quelqu'un se retrouve un appartement, se retrouve une stabilité résidentielle, après ça, c'est vraiment une approche qu'on va préconiser justement pour éviter de retourner dans cette boucle-là.
Merci, Anjali. And Joma, would you like to add to Anjali's response?
Yeah, I think Anjali's response is spot on. So at the time you're homeless, you're seeking more of emergency and housing resources. It will also be difficult to coordinate a group where people do not have a formal address. At the time they don't get housed, maybe through their case manager or support worker, we can get the references and organize them into this group, yes.
Thank you, Jill. Donc, on va passer à la dernière question et j'ai vu qu'il y avait des échanges, mais je ne suis pas certain que ça a été encore répondu. Quels sont les questionnaires standardisés dont parlait Alex? So, Alex, that would be a question for you.
Yeah, so I'll speak to it quickly. I actually didn't talk about them in my presentation, but I had one bullet point on it. I don't have my notes right now on standardized questionnaires for hoarding disorder, but I can mention some off the top of my head. The most commonly used that you would see most easily used right now is probably the CIR, the Clutter Image Rating Scale. It's like a set of images that you look at and you can basically evaluate the level of clutter in a person's home. There's also the SI-R, and I can't off the top of my head remember what it stands for, but it is a hoarding rating scale of the individual. So to rate like their clutter behaviors, their functionality. There's some other subheadings in that standardized rating scale. But the purpose of why I mentioned it really is because standardized hoarding assessments, at least if we want to develop a more robust system in responding to hoarding disorder, you need standardized assessments. We need to have one standard way of thinking about and responding and how we respond to at different levels of hoarding. Currently, well, you'll see when I get to my environmental scan next, but here in Quebec, it doesn't seem to be the case that we are using across all regions, across all the CSIS networks, the same rating scales. It's really up to the interpretation of the social worker, of the evaluee, how they interpret it. But if we use a standardized scale, it's much better. It helps a lot more to understand where we are, and other case managers or social workers could look at it, and if they understand the scale, they know exactly where they are at, and it's not just basically a description of the case. So yeah, that was the purpose behind that.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, we will close off our question period and we'll be proceeding with the next segment in our presentation. Donc, on va passer à la prochaine section de notre présentation. Donc, c'est Alex de nouveau. So, off you go.
Just 1 second. Okay, so for our environmental scan, we were given a list of contacts by the Ministère de la Santé et des Services Sociaux. And the objective was to really get an understanding of what the current status is here in Quebec on the CIS network and its response to hoarding. So we contacted over 100 people in 4 departments. And out of these contacts, about 85 people responded. So it's like an 82% response rate. And largely the relevant information for the purpose of our investigation, of our inquiry, was able to be collected by email. But for a few regions, we further conducted an interview over Zoom, in-person interview that lasted about 30 minutes where we made some further inquiries. And that happened in 7 regions. So it should be kept in mind that even with all these points of contact, we really only scratched the surface of what's out there in Quebec. We didn't talk to everyone, far from it. So it could be that our findings are missing some interesting efforts in certain regions. But to summarize briefly what we found, so 17 regions reported to be currently managing cases of hoarding disorder. It was also noted that several regions were in contact with and have received training by La Maison Grise. We also noted that we also discovered that 7 regions had established, and those 7 regions were Laurentides, Montérégie-Ouest, Chaudière-Appalaches, Centre-Ouest de l'île de Montréal, Est de l'île de Montréal, Centre-Sud de l'île de Montréal, and Estrie. Those regions had established intervention pathways, laying out a sort of best practice guide for intervening in cases of hoarding disorder. We also found that 5 regions, the Laurentides, Capitale-Nationale, Montérégie-Ouest, Chaudière-Appalaches, and Bas-Saint-Laurent region had established intersectoral agreements or mandates, solidifying the roles and responsibilities of local community organizations and agencies in helping manage, refer, or lend guidance on hoarding cases in their respective regions. So finally, we noted some gaps and issues as well. It was noted that cleaning services are largely external to the CSIS network, and that the cost of cleaning is largely placed on the client requesting it. which can be a barrier to accessing the service. As well, social workers managing cases were not able to draw on like earmarked funds specifically designated for the purpose of cleaning, making it difficult to help clean people's homes. We also noted that most intervention guides and service agreements lack connecting clients to therapeutic treatment. This is often attributed to a lack of available therapists within the CSIS network. An issue we also noticed was that the vocabulary surrounding hoarding disorder is not yet fully standardized in Quebec. So there's a lot of different terms kind of referring to the same issue, like insalubrité morbide, d'encombrement, trouble d'accumulation, but often referring to cases that are very similar, even though they can also mean different things. So there is a need to standardize really the vocabulary. And this would help basically an exchange of information between regions, and making that more easy, and also to help exchange best practices. That would make that easier as well. And finally, I'll just end with a good example of a service agreement here in Quebec from the Laurentide region. So I just wanted to highlight, a good example of a service trajectory. And without going into too much detail, let me just highlight that on the left-hand side, we have a standard approach on how to respond to cases of hoarding disorder, from referral to case closure. You can see that there's like an evaluation phase that assesses public risk, the risk to the person, the level of clutter and unsanitary conditions in their home. There's also in the red box an option for immediate action, which can be necessary in many cases and is critical to include in a good service trajectory. Another important piece I wanted to highlight is also that this service trajectory also includes a special trajectory for when a person refuses help or refuses to be evaluated. And that's displayed here on the right, but actually starts right over here in the standard response. And this is just really important because denial of illness and refusal of help is a commonly faced issue in hoarding disorder. And I'll leave it at that and pass it on to Eric, who will provide some further conclusions, and we'll return to this diagram actually with some amendments we've come up with as a result of our investigations and environmental scan. So thank you everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Je pense que la prochaine partie, Eric, c'est à mon tour, c'est bien ça?
Oui, c'est à ton tour. Merci, Carole.
Sorry then, I meant to say next up is Carole.
Donc, en fait, cette partie va vraiment venir faire du pouce sur ce qui vient d'être présenté par Alex et va pouvoir être complémentaire. Le CATAC, dans la revue de la littérature qui a été faite pour l'écriture du guide Surmonter l'attaque, a montré qu'il y avait vraiment une approche qui ressortait pour répondre aux situations de TAC, d'encombrement et d'insalubrité. Et c'est l'approche d'organisation intersectorielle ou encore de task force en anglais. Donc, ça veut dire que c'est vraiment toutes les parties prenantes qui sont amenées à intervenir dans les situations de TAC qui sont regroupées dans une même organisation pour un même territoire. Ce qui vraiment permet d'adresser une réponse qui est coordonnée, collaborative et directe dans les situations d'encombrement. Et de cette façon-là, on vient maximiser les ressources versus si une seule organisation travaillait seule. On parle donc ici d'une meilleure gestion des interdépendances. Interdépendance, ça veut dire que qu'une seule organisation n'aurait ni les ressources, ni la légitimité, ni la capacité de répondre à la situation d'encombrement si elle ne travaille pas avec les autres acteurs. Et c'est une organisation qui est permanente, qui est encadrée par des trajectoires et des ententes. L'autre modèle que Alex a aussi mentionné, c'est le modèle de gestion de cas, et Chioma également. Donc, dans ce modèle, c'est plusieurs stratégies qui sont utilisées dans un contexte communautaire, souvent dans les situations de troubles de santé mentale sévères. Au Québec, peut-être que ça va vous dire quelque chose si je vous parle de suivi d'intensif dans le milieu, les CIM qu'on a dans le NOSTIS et CIUS, c'est ce qui s'y apparente. En fait, la gestion de cas est différente de l'organisation intersectorielle, mais complémentaire à celle-ci. Dans l'organisation intersectorielle, c'est vraiment l'organisation en entier qui assure les services auprès de la personne qui a une problématique de TAC, tandis que dans la gestion de cas, c'est qu'il y a une personne, un intervenant pivot qui va faire la majorité des interventions, que ce soit de l'éducation psychologique, du modeling, de l'intervention de crise et qui va s'entourer des spécialistes de différentes disciplines selon les besoins qui ont été évalués. Donc, les recherches qui ont été menées sur la gestion de cas ont été faites justement dans des task force pour le TAC. Ça a montré que c'était un modèle qui était favorable, mais il y a encore d'autres recherches qui doivent être faites pour pousser plus loin l'évaluation de ce modèle. Le CATAC a la chance de collaborer et d'être en contact avec plusieurs partenaires dans plusieurs régions du Québec, ce qui me permet de vous présenter aujourd'hui les initiatives collaboratives qu'on retrouve à Québec. Oui, il y a des initiatives qui s'inspirent des organisations intersectorielles et de la gestion de cas, comme le modèle du site des Laurentides que vient de présenter Alex. Il y a aussi d'autres types d'initiatives collaboratives et on pense vraiment qu'elles méritent d'être évaluées et de servir de source d'inspiration pour les autres régions du Québec. Donc, je vais en nommer quelques-unes. Sachez que cette liste-là est non exhaustive. Premièrement, le CATAC est en contact avec environ 10 régions sur les 17 régions administratives du Québec. Et aussi, le CATAC n'a pas pu parler à l'ensemble des acteurs, mais ça nous donne quand même une idée des belles choses qui sont réalisées dans notre province. Donc, on a déjà parlé d'approche intersectorielle. On a aussi le projet Ensemble et bien logé en Mauricie qui utilise cette approche. Il y a également plusieurs régions qui ont des trajectoires ou des algorithmes comme celui qu'a présenté Alex à l'écran, donc entre autres dans différents CIUS de Montréal et aussi des Laurentides. Il y a des ententes intersectorielles qui sont signées en différents organismes, comme l'exemple de l'Office municipal d'habitation de Montréal avec des organismes communautaires comme la Maison Grise ou le Centre de soir de Nice-Massé. Il y a aussi le CIS de la Naudière qui a plusieurs ententes signées avec plusieurs municipalités différentes de son territoire. On a remarqué aussi que dans beaucoup de régions, il y a des comités intersectoriels qui existent, des tables où les organismes se parlent, réfléchissent à comment améliorer les services pour les situations d'encombrement et d'insalubrité. Il y a aussi des communautés de pratique où vraiment il y a plus des cas cliniques concrets de personnes qui vivent avec un TAC qui sont discutés. On a un exemple à Laval et à Québec, dans la ville de Québec, entre autres. Et finalement, on a aussi dans les pratiques collaboratives une équipe mixte d'un organisme communautaire avec une intervenante du CIS de la capitale nationale qui est en fait l'APIR de clé en main à Québec, qui est en collaboration avec le logement social, entre autres l'Office municipal d'habitation de Québec, pour offrir un accompagnement en prévention de l'instabilité résidentielle, dont dans les cas d'encombrement et d'insalubrité. Je conclurai, en fait, c'est un rappel de ce qui a été dit jusqu'à présent, mais on a vu dans la présentation aujourd'hui qu'il y a nombreuses approches qui sont reconnues et qui fonctionnent pour les personnes qui vivent avec un TAC, que ce soit les approches basées sur la TCC, l'approche basée sur les inférences. Il y a aussi l'approche de réduction des méfaits qui est vraiment utile dans les situations d'encombrement et d'insalubrité, quelle que soit la sévérité, l'urgence de la situation ou encore la capacité de la personne à se mobiliser. Finalement, il y a aussi les groupes de parole, les groupes d'entraide qui font partie des approches probantes. Donc, l'idée, ce serait de pouvoir développer une offre de service qui est adaptée selon ces différentes approches psychosociales, basée sur une évaluation de la personne et de son logement et intégrée dans un continuum de services. Donc, je vous remercie pour votre écoute.
Bonjour à nouveau. Je vais essayer de conclure de façon très macro et puis ensuite me hasarder à suggérer quelques recommandations qui sont encore préliminaires et sujettes à révision avant qu'on produise notre rapport. Donc, c'est clair que le TAC est une problématique importante, on l'a vu sous plusieurs angles. Il existe des pistes organisationnelles, Carole en parlait il y a un instant, Alex aussi y a fait allusion, diverses méthodes thérapeutiques ayant une certaine efficacité. Et on a mis l'accent sur l'efficacité de la TCC et l'efficacité, y compris de groupe, et l'efficacité comparable de Buried in Treasures, qui est plus facile à déployer parce qu'on n'a pas besoin de psychologue, on peut utiliser un pair. Carole a fait état des nombreux efforts par de multiples acteurs depuis plusieurs années. Mais quand même, ce qu'on voit, c'est que, ça on l'a vu dans le scan environnemental que Alex a présenté, on n'a pas encore une approche systématique, complète, qui inclut non seulement la réponse à la crise, mais aussi l'accès à la thérapie au suivi à long terme à travers la province. Donc, ce que ça veut dire, c'est que dans bien des cas, les personnes qui ont un TAC ne bénéficieront pas de l'accompagnement dont elles ont besoin. Donc, nos recommandations préliminaires, en fait, j'ai une diapo ici avec du texte, puis ensuite, je vais revenir sur le diagramme du CIS des Laurentides. Donc, premièrement, que chaque CIUS ou CIS s'assure qu'un mécanisme intersectoriel de prise en charge impliquant des municipalités, des services d'incendie, organismes communautaires, etc., basé sur celui de Laurentides soit mis en place avec gestion de cas, comme on le verra. Aussi, qu'un soutien technique centralisé et un processus d'évaluation et d'amélioration continue de la qualité soit mis en place. Personnellement, j'étais assez épaté par l'évaluation du service Bird and Treasures et ce qui l'accompagne, qui nous a été présenté par Chuma. Et une fois qu'on aura un système robuste en place, que des campagnes de sensibilisation dans la population générale soient menées pour que les personnes ayant un TAC soient dépistées et référées au service plus rapidement. Pardon? Bon, je continue et je termine très vite. Donc, je reprends ici le diagramme provenant du 6 des Laurentides que Alex vous a mené, mais j'y ajoute quelques éléments. Que tout d'abord, pour le signalement, c'est indiqué à tout membre signataire de l'entente, donc entente intersectorielle. On peut aussi imaginer qu'un appel au 811 ou 311, le cas échéant, amène à quelqu'un qui va répondre au téléphone et pouvoir donner suite à l'appel. Donc, la première évaluation se ferait par une équipe désignée et imputable. Il faudrait que quelqu'un soit toujours disponible pour répondre. Ça peut être un organisme communautaire par entente de service par le CIUS ou le CIUS. L'évaluation devrait se faire au moyen d'un outil, d'une méthode standardisée et devrait tenir compte du risque de perte de logement. On en revient au risque d'itinérance. Et l'action immédiate requise sera également pour prévenir l'éviction. Ensuite, l'intervention, ici, c'est décrit intervention conjointe des signataires de l'entente, mais si on a des gestionnaires de cas, celles-ci peuvent construire eux-mêmes ou elles-mêmes un plan d'intervention qui sera conforme au protocole de l'entente. Et les actions seront déterminées aussi selon le risque de perte de logement. Enfin, l'intervention psychosociale inclut la TCC et notamment BIT à cause de son aspect relativement facile à appliquer à large échelle parce qu'on n'a pas besoin d'augmenter le nombre de psychologues dans la province. Et le suivi régulier impliquerait aussi l'accès à ces thérapies. Donc voilà, je m'arrête là. Je vous remercie énormément de votre attention et il reste encore 5 minutes pour quelques questions.
Finalement, il semble qu'il n'y a pas d'autres questions. Donc, peut-être on peut clore en disant mais merci beaucoup pour l'ensemble des présentateurs.
Pardon,
Et peut-être.
il y a une personne qui se désigne Hella a levé la main.
Oh, OK. Sorry, I didn't see that. Ella.
Oh, hi. No, I just wanted to know the difference between Zoom and Zoom Workplace because it's the first time I used it. It's more a technical question.
Well, I invite you, Hella, to send that to us by email, and
Okay.
And we'll answer it and speak to you if need be. Thank you.
Okay, and also to mention that also that the it wasn't mentioned about the hoarding and the syndrome Diogen, the difference between that, because a lot of people still don't know.
Well, is somebody able to answer that question? Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui est en mesure de répondre à cette question?
Je peux répondre à cette question-là. Par contre, c'est quand même une longue réponse. Donc, parce qu'il y a vraiment une grande distinction entre le TAC et le syndrome de Diogène qui, très rapidement, ce qu'on peut vous dire, c'est que le TAC est un trouble de santé mentale et Diogène est un trouble beaucoup plus neurocognitif.
Oui.
Mais si jamais vous voulez en savoir plus, ben, vous pouvez communiquer avec moi directement, puis ça me fera plaisir de vous en dire un peu plus là-dessus. Merci, Ella.
Merci, Julie.
Thank you, Ella. Merci beaucoup, Anne-Julie.
Thank you.
Je vous trouverai, pour ceux qui restent encore, vous trouverez dans le chat un lien vers un formulaire, un sondage de satisfaction dont on va transmettre de nouveau avec le PowerPoint, etc. Et Eric, est-ce que tu aurais quelques mots à dire pour clôturer?
Bien, simplement, merci beaucoup d'avoir participé à ce webinaire. Donc, dans le cadre d'une subvention reçue du CRSH par le collectif québécois pour la prévention de l'itinérance, nous montons une série de webinaires concernant le thème de la prévention de l'itinérance. Nous prévoyons aussi une conférence sur comment on pourrait monter un cadre juridique pour mieux prévenir l'itinérance au Québec. Cette conférence se tiendra le 27 octobre, juste avant la conférence de l'Alliance canadienne pour mettre fin à l'itinérance qui aura lieu cette année à Montréal du 28 au 30 octobre. Alors, merci beaucoup à tout le monde pour votre participation. Vous allez recevoir les diapos, un lien vers l'enregistrement. Et si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter. J'ai mis tous nos courriels dans le chat. Alors, merci encore et bonne fin de semaine.
Excusez, est-ce qu'il y a possibilité, vous avez parlé d'un guide surmonter le TAC, est-ce qu'il y a possibilité de se le procurer, ce guide-là?
Oui, absolument. Je vais laisser Carole en parler.
Merci.
Voilà. Ben, je pense que Carole avait fait le partage d'écran. On ne t'entend pas, Carole. Mais en
Ah,
fait,
je suis
vous allez
désolée.
sur le site accumulationcompulsive.ca. Vous pouvez vous le procurer. C'est un outil qui est... c'est un livre numérique, en fait, qui coûte 35 et vous pouvez vous le procurer. Il est encore là en ligne.
Et également, Anne-Julie, il y a possibilité de l'acheter en distribution multiple, par exemple pour une équipe de travail de 20 personnes maximum, au coût de 80 dollars. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Donc, bon vendredi tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci à tous.
C'était quoi la date du 25 octobre? Excuse, j'ai pas compris. C'était quoi?
Merci beaucoup.
C'est le 27 octobre et c'est une conférence d'une journée sur comment les réformes légales peuvent être instrumentales dans la prévention de l'itinérance. Il y aura plus d'informations qui suivront.
Et ça va être où?
Au Centre Saint-Pierre, mais il y a plus d'informations qui suivront.
Ça va suivre alors.
Oui, voilà.
Merci beaucoup.
OK, de rien. Thank you for the question. Merci pour la question.
Merci beaucoup.